Hello everyone, welcome to episode 3 of the Marksmen Challenge Workbench tutorial series. This episode is on how to upgrade the DIllon Super Swage 600 to make the process more automated. Following this short video clip here, there will be a few still shots with a list of most of the materials I used to do the upgrade, and then I'll get into the video to explain the process. There will also be some still photos at the end of the video showing close-ups of the things you'll see here in the video. I've seen other people use string, rubber bands, and such for this mod, but I wanted something a little more sturdy. I used a couple pieces of hardwood I had laying around the house, used some angle iron to make some angle brackets. I picked up 16 inches of 1/16 inch sheathed cable, one 632 machine screw, one 1/16 inch ferrule and stop kit, which includes 2 ferrules and 2 stops, 1/4 inch eye bolt. Your length will depend on what your mounting surface is, and 1 spring. I recommend probably a 3.5 to 4 inch long by 3/8 047 spring. You may not be able to find that exact spring at your local hardware stores, but I'm sure you'll be able to find something that works just fine. Once you've got all your parts, first thing you're going to want to do is drill an 1/8 inch hole in your handle. I drilled mine about a 1/2 inch from where the handle steps down. The next thing you're going to want to do is drill and tap the lever for the locator bar. I tapped it to 632 to hook the spring and cable to. Originally I was going to drill a hole into the lever itself, but hooking the cable on there was going to be a lot more trouble. It's much easier to use the screw and hook them that way. If you need to disassemble it, it's easy to do. Next is the spring. My original spring was shorter and smaller than this, and after a bit of use it started stretching out the spring because it was stretching too much. So you want something that's only going to stretch 1/2 inch to 1 inch maybe at most, so that it doesn't weaken the spring, but you still have plenty of tension on it when it's closed like this to hold the locator bar against the stop. Alternately, instead of using an eye bolt, you could drill and tap the side of the swager and put another screw there to hook the spring to. That would work too. It might look a little bit cleaner. I just didn't want to drill and tap a hole into the side of the swager, just in case there was a chance that might void the warranty. Okay, the next step is to set up the cable that you're going to use to connect to the locator bar lever to go underneath the swager and then up to the handle. I decided to strip the sheathing off of the cable and use a smaller 1/16 inch ferrule and stop kit. Alternately, you could just leave the sheathing on there, which might make it a bit easier actually, and just use the 1/8 inch ferrule and stop kits. The only difference is the ferrule and stops are quite a bit bigger. I'll quickly show you how to do this with the sheath cable. Take the ferrule, feed the cable through, pull it through a ways, feed it back through so it just comes through a little bit, pull the loop back through until it's small enough to go around the screw, put it on a hard surface, take a screwdriver, smack, 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 flip it over, smack it once there just to clamp it on, and you're done. But since I wanted to use the smaller ferrules, I stripped the sheathing off, stuck it through one end, then tried to loop it back around, but because there was no sheathing on there to hold the cable together, it started fraying. I ended up having to take my welder, touch it to the end of the unsheathed cable, which melted it together. Then I used my grinder to grind down the end so that it would fit through the ferrule again, fed it through, and crimped it on there. There's about 1.5 inches of unsheathed cable there for that ferrule. Now for the surface that you're going to be mounting your swager to, you're going to need a channel for the cable to run through so it doesn't bind up underneath the swager. I ran a 3/16 inch deep by about 1/2 inch wide channel, all the length of the swager. Then I ended up routing it out all the way through the board just so we could see what was going on from the back side. One thing you need to pay attention to here is the fact that the bottom bolt there in the picture is right in the center of the channel, so you need to make sure your channel is wide enough that the cable will ride alongside that bolt without binding up. Now on this end, originally I was running the cable just over that cam bracket there. I didn't have the nail, and after a couple hundred swaged brass, not only did it wear the sheathing off the cable, but the cable started wearing a groove in the back of the cam bracket right here. There you can see there's a small groove right there. I didn't want that to get any worse, so I got a nail, decided to run the cable over the nail to protect the cable and the cam bracket both. Grabbed a couple of these low voltage staples, stapled the nail to the wood with those. They work great. The nail's snug, but just to make sure, I didn't want the nail coming out, so I left the head on, tapped it down into the wood. That kept the nail from sliding in and out of the staples. Chopped the other end of the nail off, and now that the cable runs over the nail, it doesn't wear on the cable or the nail, either one. I've now swaged 500 or 600 brass with this setup, and the cable and nail both look great. Now we're ready to set the timing. I raised the handle until the swaging button was flush with the floating shell plate and marked the location on the bracket. So I want the handle no higher than this mark, or the cable will try to lift the brass out of the swager while the swaging button is still in the primer pocket. And at this point, the locator rod should be fully seated and ready for the swaging button. So you can see my mark right here. The rod is just at the mark. As I pass that mark, the locator rod is all the way in. It starts to move out after I've passed that mark. When I get back to that mark, the locator rod is all the way in again. Then the swaging button comes down, swages, back, case out. To get the timing right, I just ran the cable through the hole and then held it to the handle as I moved up and down until I had the timing where I wanted it and knew where I wanted to put my ferrules. I put one here to hold the cable. I didn't have one here on the original one, and the edge of this hole was kind of sharp and it was kind of wearing on the cable. I even filed out the edge of the hole to round it off a little bit, but it was still seemed to be wearing the cable a little bit. So I just put this other ferrule on here just to keep the cable from wearing on the hole. When I made my stand, I wasn't sure if I wanted the swager to be all the way up against the edge of the table. I ended up deciding that I wanted to have it back a little ways. So I just do this, put a clamp on. Once you have this all set up, it should work great. Now, DIllon recommends that you sort your brass before you swage it. The reason for that is some brass has different tolerances, so you may have to adjust your locator rod in or out for that brass to go in smoothly. For example, the brass you see me swaging here is all LC brass. Every once in a while you'll see that one of them doesn't quite go all the way in. I have to just give it a little gentle nudge. That is all LC 07 brass. Of all my LC brass, only the year 07 does that, and I just give it a gentle nudge and it goes in. And with these still pictures, this concludes the tutorial. I hope you found it informative. If you liked the video, please like and subscribe. Check out my other videos. I'll have more to come. And thanks for watching.